Poorva, they will join in a minute.
Wait. Why was it showing? Hi, everyone. Hi, once again. We are back with another edition of Melow Musings, and this time we are focused on our younger population, on the research scholars who have been helping us from time to time, doing a lot of work for Melow, volunteering for duties from whenever they are required. So this is Melow Musings. We meet every fortnight over a session like this, and we either discuss a new concept or a book or a writer, or we have an interaction, a tete-a-tete with someone, a literary figure. And today there is a difference. We have roped in some research scholars who will be talking about the passion that they have for their subject. So we have 4 of them lined up today, and the session is going to be chaired by Professor Debarati Bandyopadhyay. Hi, Debarati, how are you?
Hello, ma'am. Thank you. Fine. And it's wonderful to be here today. Thank you, ma'am.
It's good to see you. Great to see you. This is the 31st episode of Melow Musings, and we have a long way to go. With your support, with all of you coming together every fortnight, there's a lot that we can do together. So this is the younger generation that is coming before you today, and I'm going to hand them over to Debarati. So Debarati, I'm going to switch off my camera, but I'll be very much here. So over to you, and these young speakers, they can come turn by turn and introduce themselves. So it's all yours. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, our speakers today are Ahmad Ishtiaque, Asmita Sharma, Poorva and Tripti Agarwal. And I hope all of them are here. Poorva is also here. Yes, thank you, Poorva, for joining. So, may I ask Ahmad Ishtiaque from the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University to speak first, and you have about each of you would have about 12 minutes or so, and then later on we would be having a discussion. So, please introduce yourself and your topic first for all of us.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much, and I'm grateful to Melow for this opportunity. My name is Ishtiaque. I am a research scholar at the Department of English at GGS-IPU. I'm working with Professor Vivek Sachdeva. Uh, Before I start, I just want to clarify that I'm still in the middle of things. I'm still writing things, and this is why I just want to give an overview of my topic and not just dwell too much deep into it. So I'll just, if with your permission, ma'am, can I share a presentation?
Yes, but first tell us what is the topic.
Yes.
Okay,
So
okay.
my topic is third cinema in India, understanding the dialectics between ideology and aesthetics. And I'll just share my screen now. Just give me a second, ma'am. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question that comes to everyone's mind, mostly in the Indian subcontinent, is what is third cinema? What exactly is third cinema? Just start from the beginning. Okay. So, well, the term third cinema finds its origins in Latin America when two Argentine filmmakers, Fernando Solanas and Octavio Etino, penned a manifesto named Towards the Third Cinema in 1969. This film movement has been inspired primarily by the Brazilian cinema novo or cinema new, which differed from the Western filmmaking styles of epic musicals and fantasies to show the socio-economic realities of the region. The pair of directors had earlier directed La Hora de los Hornos, or The Hour of the Furnaces, in 1968, which remains one of the most overtly political films of third cinema to this day. Uh, in its earlier stages, as articulated by the manifestos and theories, third cinema was a militant practice parallel with revolutionary struggles of the times, produced to provoke discussion with and amongst its viewers and propose alternative visions of the past, present, and future. Now, I talked about militant cinema, and which forms the crux of the third cinema movement. Now, what exactly is militant cinema? There is a certain symbolic reference to the shooting using a camera and the shooting of the gun. So, when it comes to militant cinema, uh, it is an ideology that cinema should be an active revolutionary tool rather than passive entertainment, producing film acts or cine action that trigger social change. Uh, it is somehow also related to Utpal Dutt's revolutionary theater, which focuses on theater's direct connection to provoke people, to directly, we could call it propaganda, but it's something that should immediately provoke people in doing something, provoke something for action, provoke people for doing something and for some action. And Utpal Dutt is very important to be mentioned here because this is when Utpal Dutt wrote Towards a Revolutionary Theatre, and when he talked about revolutionary theatre, he is at the time a significant member of the Indian People's Theatres Association, which eventually contributes towards the first the primary parallel cinema movement with Ritvik Ghatak and even eventually Shyam Benegal, Syed Akhtar Mirza and all. So what third cinema does, uh, as it's stated in the manifestos of the cinema movement, is that it aims for the decolonization of culture, targeting poverty, social unrest, and the legacy of imperialism. So these topics are very significant to keep in mind because they are the ones which ultimately contribute to the uh, or ultimately they differentiate between other political cinema and cinema which is specifically considered third cinema. Well, sorry. Okay, and at the outset, third cinema might have been synonymous with guerrilla cinema and cinema like a gun, which gave it a distinct militant nature. However, as Adino points out, that third cinema is not limited to being militant or overtly political, but which aimed, above all, at greater knowledge and commitment and a new relationship with the viewer. Now, if we talk about the ideology of third cinema, the questions and deliberations of third cinema having a distinct ideology are rooted in the realization that sets it apart from its predecessors, that is, first cinema and second cinema. What exactly is first cinema? First cinema is the traditional mainstream Hollywood cinema, while second cinema is the auteur cinema. While both first cinema and third cinema are categories, are types or classifications of cinema, on the other hand, third cinema becomes a proper movement. It comes with a certain ideology attached to it. So while the first and third cinema are predominantly templates of filmmaking, third cinema is a film movement, much like the other diverse film movements around the world. Several films of third cinema, also known as auteur cinema, align with the ideology of the third cinema movement. But while auteur cinema is understood as a purely singular project spearheaded by the director, third cinema could be understood as more of a collective project, as a part of the larger movement. The auteur in third cinema is only relevant as a part of the collective project of the movement, and only if the project adheres to the ideology of the movement. Ideologically, the third cinema movement is a post-colonial project, countering or attempting to counter the sociological and economic developments of colonialism and imperialism, while acknowledging the realities of the post-colonial world. In the sphere of cinema, third cinema movement becomes an alternative to the dominant template of first cinema and a cultural recourse for cinema in and for the third world. The two primary ways in which I'm going to analyze third cinema, or I intend to analyze third cinema in my thesis, is to understand the relationship between ideology and aesthetics. As my chapterizations include having independent analysis of ideology first and then aesthetics. Now, when I'm talking about ideology, I talk about how the films are being produced, who funds them, and if the state has a significant role in funding them. As with third cinema and as with other film movements, even with India, even in the case of India, we had the Film Finance Corporation in the 1950s, which pledged to fund good cinema, within quotations, good cinema. And then from the FFC, the Film Financing Corporation, we had the NFDC, the National Film Development Corporation, which, due to multiple reasons, throughout years, it has been subdued because of multiple reasons. But still now we do have proper funding by the state to make good independent cinema, which does not have a commercial liability. Because as with cinema, we know that there is obviously a commercial liability of earning as much as you spend, or even more than that. So NFDC or FFC or the state of any cinema movement or any cinema initiative in general, the state plays a significant role. With third cinema and with all the movements of third cinema in Latin America, we see, for example, imperfect cinema in Cuba. We also see North Korean cinema. We see proper movements in Spain, Mexico. With all of these movements, the state had played a significant role. So while I would be discussing ideology in my thesis, I would be talking about and analyzing the role of the state and how much role does the state has in the cultural production of cinema. The other focus would be the aesthetics of third cinema, which is rooted in radical Marxist sensibilities, which become apparent in its ideological expression. While some of this militancy has faded as revolutionary struggles have changed or failed and new issues have arisen, third cinema has evolved to address problems in nation building projects, to express disillusionment and impotence, and to respond to new forms of cultural oppression. The pioneers of third cinema insist that art and cinema must first and foremost play an emancipatory role and act as virtual revolutionary weapons in the struggle for liberation. For example, the aesthetics of hunger, as Gobar Rocha points out in, I suppose it's Argentine cinema. He talks about how specific shots which focus directly, which are pretty raw and focus directly on poverty, or on actors who are not professional actors, but they're they're actors who are already in this role, who are already the person that they are in their real life, right? And also focusing on how this aesthetics of poverty, like when he talks about aesthetics of poverty, he's not beautifying poverty, but on the other hand, he is creating an alternative to aesthetics and focusing on that. In my thesis, I intend to discuss about this anti-aesthetics part of third cinema, where the focus is on elements of poverty, on elements of elements of colonialism or neo-colonialism, and even imperialist elements, which find main space in the third cinema movement. Also with imperfect cinema, as Espinosa points out, that cinema does not have to be perfect. The shots don't have to be aesthetic, as we see very much in the case of Ritvik Ghatak, in opposition to, for example, someone like Satyajit Ray, who is very formalist in nature, and who is very formalist in his shots and in his cinematography. While on the other hand, someone like Ritvik Ghatak is very raw and very very direct, without any kind of intervention, formalist intervention. He's more about the thematic and the ideological nature of ideological function of the camera. Okay, so the methodology that I'm using for my thesis, primarily it's Marxist film theory, and it analyzes political economy, including ownership, labor, labor as in everyone who is a part of the film, the actors, I mean, also in a certain way the director as well. How the distribution works, because films have to be distributed. There are certain agencies which control the distribution, and what platforms they're being put out to, and how is the reception like. And then ideology, form, and spectatorship, understanding the form of filmmaking in general, and how the apparatus of the camera, the camera as a whole, how the camera obscura techniques they follow in creating what third cinema ultimately intends to create, such as in editing or the operation, and identifying this. And I also talk about aesthetic theory and cultural studies, trying to understand commercialization and commodification in cinema, cinema's popular nature, and also its financial liabilities. My primary objectives include identifying third cinema in India. Now, because the movement it's not certain if this movement is still in the same intensity as it was when it was established during the 1960s and 70s. But what I'm trying to do primarily is contextualizing third cinema in the context of Indian filmmaking, because as we know, in India we had a lot of political filmmaking, primarily starting with the parallel cinema movement, which obviously, as I talked earlier, came out of the Indian People's Theatre Association with a group of directors. But the questions that I'm trying to understand is, can we contextualize political films in India as a part of the third cinema movement? One. Secondly, what exactly would be a third cinema film? Are all political films third cinema? So until this point, I have understood that, well, if it's supposed to be a third cinema film, if it's a political film, and it's supposed to be a third cinema film, it should primarily focus on the themes and problems of the third world, like neocolonialism, imperialism, poverty, which are very much common in India as in the other Latin American countries when the movement started to rise at that point of time. Now, the timeline is almost similar, and this is why it's important to understand Indian political filmmaking in the context of the larger third cinema movement. What I also do is I regionalize the movement. So the focus is on films which specify understanding the regional problems, and then it becomes, while identifying the regional problems, they become a cohort, and they ultimately represent the national problems, and ultimately the problems of the third world. Identifying a distinct aesthetic, if there is a certain aesthetic of the third cinema, if certain films properly could be called aesthetically identifying to the larger themes and ideologies of the third cinema, and understanding the ideology and the involvement of the state, understanding politics of aesthetics and the politics of representation, and understanding the dialectics of aesthetics, style, and ideology, how all of these things combine to make third cinema in India. Uh, well, this is the end of my presentation. I will just stop sharing. The directors that I primarily focus on include Ritvik Ghatak, Shyam Benegal, Syed Akhtar Mirza, and others. I mean, the list of films, they are not exhaustive. They might include anything and everything, but the timeline that I am focusing on currently is we start with the primary political era of films in India, which is the 1950s with the parallel cinema movement. And there is also a chapter before the conclusion, which I'm still deliberating on if I should focus on the current independent cinema or if this should be a topic which I could work on later. So this has been the overview of my research, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yes, Ishtiaque, thank you so much. We are going to discuss all the papers at the end. So now I would invite Asmita Sharma, who is a PhD scholar at Himachal Pradesh University.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, absolutely fine.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Asmita Sharma, and I am a research scholar at the Department of English, Himachal Pradesh University. My supervisor is Dr. Himanshu Parmar, and the title of my research, the topic of my research, the title is Retracing Folklore and the Sacred Through the Institution of Nags in Select Regions of Western Himalayas. I'm working in the field of folklore studies and orality. Ma'am, with your permission, can I please share my screen? I have a PPT.
Yes.
Ma'am, is it visible?
Yes, it
So
is.
today I invite all of you to step into a living, breathing sacred world. My presentation is a glimpse of the sacred in the Western Himalayas, specifically select regions in the state of Himachal Pradesh. My research is titled Retracing Folklore and the Sacred Through the Institution of Nags in Select Regions of the Western Himalayas. It explores how folklore, orality, and everyday ritual practices shape a unique spiritual landscape and an individual identity of select groups. I would like to begin with an image. Imagine that you are walking along a narrow mountain path. The air is thin here, the slopes are steep, and in the distance, you see a small village. Clustered slate roofed houses, cattle tied near wooden verandas, prayer flags or bright cloth fluttering in the wind tied to poles. Now, as you step into this village, you see that life around you moves very quietly. Women are working in the fields, the elders are sitting in the sun, children are running along the paths. And then, as you move ahead, in the center of this settlement, slightly set apart, you notice a wooden temple structure. It is not grand in the way that we usually imagine temples. It feels very natural. It is a very natural part of the village itself. Aged wood, carved doors, a presence that is sensed rather than announced. Now, if you decide to step inside this temple, you'll see that there is no idol that is waiting for you inside. Instead, you are told by the people of this village that their Devta lives here. Not as a fixed image, not as something you simply look at, but as a presence that lives with the people. A deity who does not remain confined to stone or scripture. This deity here moves. It travels from one village to another village. It listens when spoken to. It responds when called upon. And slowly, you begin to realize that you're not just visiting a place of worship, you are entering into a relationship. Every aspect of life in the hills is intrinsically connected with the sacred here. Here we see the sacred is not distant or abstract. It is immediate, it is embodied. Villages are not just settlements, they are living cultural worlds where Devis and Devtas are active participants in the daily life of their people. These deities are treated as heads of families, as rulers, as protectors, as living beings with emotions, relationships, and agencies. The devtas feel angry, the devtas feel happy, they celebrate with you, and they make their feelings known, their emotions known to their own people. The devtas are not just related to their own people, but they're also related to each other. So, one of my case studies is Bering Nag from the Sangla Valley, and he has brothers. One brother he brought with him to the Sangla Valley, to Sangla Valley itself. Another brother he settled in Rodu Valley, which is in district Shimla. So the devtas are connected through these relationships, and because of these relationships, the people of different villages are also connected with each other. You see that this presence inside the temple is not one which remains within the walls of the temple. When the devta comes out, he does not do so silently. He appears draped in silks, adorned with flowers, in the form of a richly decorated rath or palki, on which are placed small metallic masks called moras. If you look at the picture on the screen, you will see the palki of Devta. This is Bering Nag in Sangla. You'll see the palki. You'll see two poles in front, two at the back. These are the poles that are placed on the shoulders of people who are carrying them. You'll also be able to see the little masks. These are called moras, and you'll see this headgear, I would call it. It is made out of yak hair, and the yak also belong to the devta. So no ordinary yak. The yak, which is the property of the devta, it is made out of yak hair, and and you. This is the physical manifestation of the deity. The masks are often made of ashtatu. They now they're also made of silver or gold, and as the you see that the rath is carried on the shoulders of men. In some places, even women are allowed to carry the rath of the devta. The devta will be accompanied by drums, trumpets, and the resonant mountain sounds. And then you'll see something remarkable is going to happen. The deity begins to move. I would like to share a video here. I hope it plays. So you see this remarkable thing happen. The deity begins to move. A sudden violent shake may signal anger. A gentle tilt may mean approval. The deity is not being carried, you realize. The deity is in control of its own movements. The deity is communicating with his people. The people watch, they interpret these movements, they respond to these movements, and decisions are made, disputes are settled. And when the deity wishes to speak more directly, he does so through the gur or the mali, which is the human medium. The gur enters into this sort of a trance, his body trembling, his voice is altered, and in that moment, he is no longer just a man, he becomes a vessel. He is the voice of the deity. Questions are asked and answers are given. The divine and the human meet, not metaphorically, but physically. They meet audibly and they meet visibly. The devtas also, like I showed you in the video, they travel hundreds of kilometers on the shoulders of their people. They make journeys, they set out on journeys, and one of those journeys, Sangla Nag, Bering Nag from the Sangla Valley, he travels to Hatkoti, which is in Tehsil Jubbal of district Shimla. Now the distance is around 186 kilometers approximately, and the entire distance is covered on foot. The Devta does not sit in modern vehicles. So we see that the deity is intrinsically connected. The life of the people is intrinsically connected with the deity, with the sacred. And there are also moments of rupture in these communities. Sometimes the deity becomes displeased, it leaves the temple, it withdraws from its people. The village senses the deity's absence through misfortune or imbalance, and then begins another journey. This time, not a physical journey, but an emotional journey. The community must seek forgiveness, they perform rituals, they make offerings, and they bring the deity back with reverence. Now, this is the world that I am studying. A world where folklore is not just told, but lived and experienced. My work focuses on Nag Devtas, particularly Nag Devtas of Yulakanda and Sangla in Kinnaur, the Nags of Yangrang Marbal, along with the narratives of Kelang Nag, Date Nag, and Gehpan in Lahore and Spiti, and the stories of Budhi Nagin and her sons, the Thara Nag, in Kullu. Now, to briefly situate this within a theoretical framework, I have borrowed from Robert Redfield. Now, Redfield described culture as operating between what he calls the great tradition and the little tradition. The great tradition refers to codified, textual, and institutionalized forms of culture, of which religion is a part of the institutionalized form of culture, whereas the little tradition is oral, it is local, and it is rooted in everyday practices. In the Indian context, it has been elaborated by A.K. Ramanujan, by G.N. Devi, and they suggest that both the great tradition and the little tradition are not separate worlds, but they are constantly interacting with each other. What we see in the Himalayas is precisely this interaction, where local beliefs coexist with, they adapt to, and sometimes even reshape broader religious frameworks. Across these regions, one thing becomes very clear across all my case studies, all narratives. One thing is very clear: there is no single story. There are many voices, there are many versions, and sometimes even contradictions in the oral narratives. And yet, all of this variety, it coexists very peacefully together. To engage with this complexity, my research also draws on a few key conceptual tools. It looks at lived experiences to understand how communities inhabit and interpret their beliefs in everyday life. It uses the idea of chronotope to trace how these traditions are shaped across time and space. It also engages with polyphony to account for multiple coexisting narratives of the same deity. It also considers Sanskritization to examine how local traditions interact with broader scriptural pan Indian religious frameworks, and individuation, the theory of individuation, to explore how these little traditions, they retain their distinct identity even within larger cultural systems. What emerges then is not a fixed system, but a dynamic interplay. On one side, there is the pull of a broader, more uniform religious framework. Uh, on the other, there are these deeply rooted localized traditions that continue to adapt without losing their specificity. And this opens avenues for cultural exploration. Uh, my intention with this project, my attempt is to identify folklore centered around indigenous Nag deities in three districts of Himachal Pradesh. It is to understand how these narratives and customs have traversed generations thematically and ritualistically. To assess the nature of interaction between the little folk traditions and the great pan Indian tradition. Uh, it is also an attempt to analyze the role of the mainstream in terms of homogenizing population and beliefs, and to also inquire into the meaning of landscape and lived experiences as preserved with reference to two aspects of sacred life, which are telling stories and performing rituals, Sthal Purans and Kriyas. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the Western Himalayas offer us a way to rethink what we mean by religion and sacred space. Here, the sacred is not distant, it is not fixed, it is not uniform. It is local, it is fluid, it is dynamic, it is deeply, deeply relational. And through the institution of Devis and Devtas, and especially through the narratives of Nag deities, we get to see a world where folklore sustains belief, where landscape holds memory, where it helps preserve identity of these small communities, and where the divine is not some place that is unreachable. So the devta is not some place which is far away from his people. The devta is right beside the people. He's dancing with his people. He's laughing with his people, he's celebrating with his people, he's blessing his people, and he's always also cursing his people at times. So the devta is not someplace unreachable, but he's right here among his own people. Thank you.
Ah, Ashmita, thank you so much. That was very interesting. And of course, we will return to you after we have listened to Poorva and Tripti. So now may I invite Poorva Gulati, who is a PhD scholar again at the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. Poorva.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank Melow, Manpreet ma'am, Manju ma'am, and everyone for giving this opportunity to present. So, I would like to take your permission, ma'am, before I share my screen. And the topic, okay, so let me first introduce myself. I've been working on mythology, gender studies, and subaltern literature under the supervision of Professor Manpreet Kaur Kang. And I've been working as lecturer English, as English faculty in IP University and NFSU for over 5 years with the paper like communication skills, personality development, corporate grooming, and so on and so forth. So, the topic of my research is Epic as a Representation of a Nation, Subaltern Study of Select Works on the Mahabharata. So, I'll share my screen, ma'am. Yes. Ma'am, I'm not able to, share the screen.
Yes.
Just one sec. I'll give you the rights, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Poorva, where are you, Poorva? Poorva here. Poorva Gulati?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I made you co-host. Now you can, huh?
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
All right. So is my screen visible?
Yes.
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 So this is the topic of my presentation, that is Epic as a Representation of a Nation, Subaltern Readings of Selected Works on the Mahabharata. And so first I'll start with a basic thing that, why Mahabharata? Why such a sacred text? Because Mahabharata in our canonical interpretations, Mahabharata in our wide interpretations, mainstream interpretations have always been considered as a very sacred text, as a very mainstream text, as a very Brahmanical text at times. But it is very important to understand that in various retellings, there have been views, there have been perspective that have been always deployed from the perspective of the term subaltern. Now, what is subaltern? We need to understand something which is not dominant, something which is removed from something known as canon, something which is not mainstream. And here I use Mahabharat as an allegory of a nation. So this topic is using metaphor of Mahabharat, but this is also talking about subaltern literature, protest literature, and nation studies. So this is where I'll give a brief introduction of my topic, that how epic since always is reinterpreted as the primal text of Indian national history and a repository of national culture. The battles between brothers Pandava and Kauravas about the regaining of the lost land is very analogous to colonial India and the nationalist struggle to reclaim their lost space. Mythology in 1940s and 1950s posits contemporary political circumstances of the nation. For instance, nationalist writers associated the body of Draupadi with the land of Bharatvarsh. When we say land of India as motherland, or when we say land of India as the mother, then obviously we are accentuating that there are many writers who are keen on emphasizing that how uh, allegories work, and by allegory they take the characters from Ramayana, from Mahabharat, and deploy those characters in the larger discourse of the nation studies. So how Draupadi is being treated many times as Bharatvarsh, reiterating the feminist criticism where the woman's body is viewed as a colonial territory, wrongly seized, violated, So my research, my thesis is delved into few of the works where I've included some primary writers, some secondary writers, and the key writer is Mahashweta Devi. There are works that I've been working: Mahashweta Devi, Daulati the Bountiful, Draupadi, Bayan, Choti Munda and his arrow, After Kurukshetra, Jashoda. These are the works of Mahashweta Devi that I have studied to understand my research better. Then Moli Manohar Bishwas, Ghatotkach and Hidimba, a dialogue. Dharamveer Bharti's Andhayog, Rabindranath Tagore's Kankunti Samvad, M.T. Vasudevan Nair, Bhim, the Lone Warrior, which is translated in English. In Malayalam, we call it as Randamus. Some text, secondary texts such as Ramdhari Sen Dinkar, Rashmirati, which is a poem which is about Kan, who is considered as a subaltern character somewhere in the Mahabharata, owing to the injustices that have been conducted, and how here Kan, through monologues and lot of dialogues, is narrating this poem. And Shashi Tharoor, again, I've not mentioned a lot of Shashi Tharoor, but yes, as a secondary text, I've deployed the Great Indian Novel. So these authors endeavor to present a collage of indigenous characters, emphasizing their rootedness in their own space. So such portrayals have been misunderstood by the mainstream, with rationalists and historians often obliterating their folk beliefs, practices, and rituals and removing them from the canon, dismantling them as superstition. Nationalists and historians, meanwhile, are unable to sometimes comprehend the rich folk beliefs, practices, rituals, and that is where this research becomes extremely important. So, again, the question is that why Mahabharat? Because nations sometimes, when the historians after colonial times, during the British time, in the pre colonial times, and even in the neo colonial times, when they are, you know, when they are compiling the notions of the dominant history, sometimes they remove someone like Adivasis or tribals or someone whose voices are being repressed, suppressed since the time immemorial. So, since always there have been a monolithic and a very singular construct of the nation that have been represented, and it becomes very important to challenge the meta narratives. So the writers that I have focused upon challenge this very overarching meta narrative and reflect a kind of a grassroots tribal struggles, where the narratives of tribals, or where the narratives of uh, Adivasis have been so easily and conveniently relegated to footnotes. So here Mahabharat act as a palimpsest. Why? Because Mahabharata is not only a sacred, not only a static, not only a religious text, but a very active site of contemporary negotiations and renegotiations. When there are certain exclusions that have been conveniently done in our mythology, like I give an example, in Mahabharata, there have been, because there have been times when Aryavat culture have been eulogized. There have been deification of Aryavat culture. For commemorating someone like Arjun, Eklavya's thumb was asked for a sacrifice. And that is where it is very important to see Eklavya in the larger discourse of the nation. It is very important. Many times I was thinking over this topic, and I've been thinking that Mahabharat, the perspective of Draupadi, have been so many times talked about so many writers. But it is very important to take writer like Mahashweta Devi, who's talking about a perspective of a tribal Draupadi. It's not Draupadi, it's Dopadi, Dopdi. To understand that there have been reinterpretations, there have been retellings which need a view beyond the sacred. And that is why exposing these exclusions and restudying these binaries of what is being read and what is being excluded becomes very important in a nationalist project where very easily tribal and Dalit experiences have been marginalized. So the relevance of Mahabharata as a national allegory when it comes to subaltern nation becomes very important, because writers like Manohar Moli Bishwas, or writer like M.T. Vasudevan Nair, or writers like Mahashweta Devi recast the nation not as a simple geographical entity of the elite, but they study the nation as nation of victimized, as nation of downtrodden, as nation of have-nots. So that becomes really important. Mahabharat is a historiography more than itihas. It is a historiography. By this we means that we can always use Mahabharata as an allegory to study how these characters have been represented. And when we go back to the past and see the ways of representation of the past, that become historiography. So the epic is an allegory for the nation's urgencies and anxieties, but below this magnificent edifice lies another truth, something which is muzzled up in the canonical readings. And that truth consists about or encompass about subalterns, the tribals, the women, the children, the disabled characters whose violated bodies become metaphors for the land that is absent in the epic monumental frame. So this research tries to examine gaps, silences, absences, leaving room for marginal readings to acquire insurgent strength. The epic is liberated from its imperial baggage and reinterpreted as a text of counter memory, highlighting resistance by marginal groups who resist their histories against the choreographed tale of national inclusion, the setup tale of national inclusion. So these retellings revise the presence of Adivasis and other subaltern groups, reclaiming their erased past and writing them into epic's cultural fabric. Mahashweta Devi, through her writings, have carved out recognition for tribals as citizens of post-colonial state without forsaking their cultural identities. So Devi discourses not to debunk the homogeneous idea of a nation. She is insistent that her tales are actually the parables of India, the national allegories along the lines of caste, tribe, class, and gender. So Devi's work can be read as a plea. Devi's writing is very synonymous to activist writings because it is actually allegorizing the nation of the victimized, the nations of the deprived, and not the nation of only the ruling groups. So because in the one year, the very first year of my PhD, I found it really hard because there have been plethora and ambit of researches that have been conducted on Mahabharat. So it was very difficult for me to delimit my text, and it was very difficult for me that how my text and my research becomes very different from the vast canon of the works that have already existed on Mahabharat. And here comes a very short crisp answer to that, that unlike the traditional epic studies, I have tried in my 4 5 years, I've tried my maximum level best to give fidelity and sanctity to the classical version. So wherever required, I'm quoting in my thesis, I've used Vivek Debroy translations of Mahabharat, which gives the actual retelling of Vyas Mahabharat. And there have been works, a lot of works, that like Chitra Banerjee Divakurni's Palace of Illusion, a very famous work which talks about the Mahabharat and the narrative of Mahabharat from Panchali's perspective. But it becomes equally important to understand that how my work is different. A lot of researches have been conducted on Draupadi, a lot of researches have been conducted on Iklavya, on Karn, on but my work is different because I am actually taking how Mahabharat is an allegory of a nation at large, how it is a part of it is in the ambit of existing scholarship, it is a part of the subaltern historiography, and I've taken characters as allegorical characters in the larger discourse of the nation and comparing it in the protest canon. So that is where this work becomes very different because it talks about the tribal. Like for example, there's one of the texts that is, I'm not simply talking about Iklavya in Mahabharat, I'm talking about Choti Munda and Azaro. Like we have read that it is one of the very beautiful, it took me 2 3 readings to understand that text, where he talks about a tribal hero Birsa Munda, where he talks about Dhani Munda, father of Birsa Munda, where he talks about how there was a famous hero who was very much famous for archery. And there have been times when it is talking about how even during the time of colonialization, tribals were suffered, and after the time of colonialism, in post-colonial times, they were triple and double marginalization when they were actually abject to extreme kind of a poverty, where their where there was no significance. So here Choti Munda or Birsa Munda becomes actually the real discourse of Eklavya of Mahabharat. So it is not simply telling about Draupadi, or it is not simply telling about Karn, but it is telling about the larger discourse of the nation, where these characters become extremely important. Choti Munda becomes extremely important. The entire narration of how this solidarity and their insurgency, how their insurgency is not seen as a very common resistance in the past, but their insurgency has a spiritual motive to it. So that is where the work become little different to what has been done. While existing literature connects subaltern studies to modern writers, there is very less literature which is focused on Mahabharat retellings from a subaltern viewpoints and nation studies. And I've tried to endeavor and I've tried to put up these 3 points into one singular framework. So the thesis bridges these domains by analyzing the specific allegories of gender. So I have divided my subaltern readings into 3 chapters. The first chapter, where I've been talking about gendered subaltern, the second chapter where I'm talking about children subaltern, and the third where I'm talking about disabled subaltern. So this is how I have divided the range of subalterns in my work. Just going ahead, not taking much time, the theoretical frameworks become very important while I'm analyzing my text, because for the first time this term subaltern was used by Antonio Gramsci. And he actually explains how the dominant Brahminical, conventional, patriarchal narratives marginalize tribal voices, strategically categorizing indigenous rituals and oral histories as mere superstition to maintain control. So Antonio Gramsci have used the word subaltern for the first time when he has actually focused and mentioned that how it is something which is not only non-dominant, but it is something which has always been de-idealized. It is something which has always been relegated. It has something which has always been said as, like for example in Mahabharat, we have a character Ghatotkach, or we have a character Hidimba. Very conveniently, the traditional interpretation of Mahabharat relegate it as Rakshasi, or relegate it as the binaries of the ideal civilized world and the Rakshasi. But there are a lot of retellings, there are a lot of works who have emphasized and made it a point to understand that how these subaltern retellings also work in a way. Then Ranajit Guha become very important, because for the first time he in Indian, as an Indian theorist, he has worked on subalterns in his very famous books, which is a sociological book, but that I have deployed as a theoretical framework to study about lot of history that have been used in Choti Munda and his arrow, Hul Maha movement, and a lot of tribal Adivasis movement, which is, and that is where the theorists Ranjit Guha and the politics of the people become really important. Then Partha Chatterjee, his theory of difference between two kind of a nation: spiritual aspect of a nation and outer, which is material aspect of the nation. Now material aspect of the nation take into consideration the administration, the politics, the economy, which we talk about when once after the colonization, but very rarely are the writers were talking about the spiritual connotation of a nation, where we talk about the culture of the nation, where we talk about the religion of the nation. But even in that spiritual connotation, Partha Chatterjee studies that their culture, their folk belief, their historicity somewhere is very easily obliterated from the canon. Then David Hardiman is actually talking about how Adivasis of Gujarat fought against liquor, illegal supply of a liquor, and how this movement is very easily deployed in Mahashweta Devi again works like after Kurukshetra, or Choti Munda and his arrow, and a lot of works which I couldn't, because owing to the space and time take in my research, such as the collection of 3 works: Choti Munda and his arrow, the tale on Birsa Munda, and Aranya Adhikar, the rights of forest. So I have taken only Choti Munda and his arrow out of this to tell and understand how this works become very important. Now,
Purva, I would ask you to conclude. Okay. It was very good listening to you, but conclude now. Okay.
okay, okay, ma'am. So I have summarized about my 3 chapters, wherein first chapter, the second chapter, I've been talking about gender representation of Mahabharat. The second chapter, I've been talking about lost voices, stolen future, which is the children of Mahabharat, who at a very early age have been patronized and asked and romanticized about war and been asked to send to the battlefield. Iklavya, Ghatotkach, Sovalle. Sovalle was the illegitimate child of Dhritarashtra and Abhimanyu. And then after my last chapter, before my last chapter, chapter 4 talks about wounded bodies to wounded nation, which is the representation of disabled subalterns in the Mahabharat. Very quickly, I'll come to conclusion now, where I have been discussed about all these things, and towards the end I will say that how the enduring power of Mahabharata does not lie in the fixed status as an ancient, sacred, and a very religious text, but passing the epic through the lens of gendered, child, and disabled subaltern, contemporary literature democratizes this narrative. It transforms a story traditionally used to consolidate elite power into polyphonic battleground, which is a living and a breathing allegory where the marginalized of the Indian nation perpetually fight for and reclaim their rightful place in the history. With this, I want to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank, thank you, Poorva. And we will return to you after we have listened to Tripti Agarwal, who is a PhD scholar at the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. So,
Okay.
yes, Tripti? Yes,
Hello for this opportunity. Ma'am, may I share my screen?
of course. And please try to maintain the time limit that we have thought of. Okay, thank you.
Manju ma'am, I'm unable to share my screen.
Just 1 minute, I'm working on it.
And currently, I recently submitted my thesis, and I almost feel like one chapter is over now, another has to be written. A lot hasn't been done, and a lot has to be done now. And currently, I am a gender consultant at Ministry of Education's Technical Support Group. Earlier, I used to teach. Recently, I have shifted to this field, and my work, uh, my thesis, is a reflection of the views that I carry now. It is related to the title of my thesis is Women Work and Home, a study of selected novels by Anita Desai, Bani Basu, and Namta Kalia. I chose this thesis. It tries to showcase how women's writing they reveal how domestic work and care, that is an important part of women's lives, and how it narrates their life, how it influences their life and impacts how they resist to this work. So there are 2 to 3 major statements of my thesis. One is that this work, domestic and care work that women do for their families at their home, that is not a part of natural femininity. It's a gender performance which is taught to them since childhood. Then how a home, which is a dwelling place for men, it turns into a working place, a task place for women. And then how women who are Indian women who cannot rebel like Ibsen's Nora, they cannot shut the gate of the house and leave, how they employ small everyday resistance to survive. Resistance helps them to survive through small acts of bickering, complaining, and sleeping. So I'll discuss my chapters once I share my screen. Yes, I can share it now. Thank you, ma'am. Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, Tripti, it is visible.
And ultimately, my work by foregrounding domestic work, this thesis position it as a central lens for understanding women's lived experience. Ma'am, I chose this topic because when I was going through other research papers and theses, I realized that domesticity has already been worked upon, but major focus on the work is lacking. That's why I picked specifically this topic. And the other reason, since childhood, I have been bothered about this gender division of labor and why the work is devalued, even though it's the essential basic requirement of living. We can downgrade the work, we can downplay it, but at the end of the day, we know it's important. It's gendered, but it's important for everybody. And the novels that I've selected, they showcase, and at the end of the thesis, I've restated this, that by criticizing the current system of domesticity, the criticizing the gender division of labor, I'm not criticizing the work. The work is necessary for survival. It shouldn't be gendered. That's the solution. And I realized that literature, while talking to women, uh, I, I, I felt that they were not too much open. They were not able to deliberate upon their experiences. They could share their experiences, but there was a hindrance of family and other things. And I realized while searching literature to pick that literature provided that avenue to say the unsaid, which women could not articulate, and the invisibility, the invisible work that exists in the house, they make it visible through words. So literature, through its narrative strategies and the plots that these women writers that I have taken, they make it visible. The invisible work, they make it visible through their different interesting narrative strategies. And also, right now we are living in a these past post 1970s to current stage. We are living in those times where womanhood and its struggle, they are taking a major change because of educational advancement, because of employment opportunities. The ideals of womanhood are changing, and alongside it, their struggles are changing. Now, earlier, when housewives was the only uh, career or only option that women had, and it was respected, somehow it was respected. But now when women have, now working women has become the criteria to judge if you are successful or not. So these changing ideals of womanhood, they are represented in the selected novels. For my thesis, I have taken three writers and two novels by each writer. Anita Desai's Fire on the Mountain and Fasting Feasting, Bani Basu's Moon and Khonami's Mount, Mamta Kalia's Narak Dar Narak, and Dukham Sukham. And these novels belong to the timeline from post 1970s to the present day. I have already stated why I chose these novels, because they cater, they circumscribe the changing ideals of womanhood, and also the characters in these novels, they belong to different age groups. We have a young uh, girl child to the old age woman reflecting back at her life full of domesticity and work and disliking it. We have young girl, she's being taught to take care of her young brother, and that's how woman is gen women is forced to perform that work as their natural identity. And obviously, these novels, they give us a lot of interesting narrative strategies. I took three research questions, and my thesis has three chapters dealing with each research question. The first research question is, how do these Indian women writers reconceptualize the home as a site of work, as a task space? Then the second question is, what are the dimensions, by analyzing these narratives, that what are the various dimensions of household and care work, what determines its distribution in the house, how modernity impacts its distribution. And then the third chapter is about how women in their daily lives, they they resist the work and its exploitation through daily acts of resistance. So I have charted these small acts of resistance, which is generally said to be like women is being cranky, they are gossiping. But these small acts, they act as an act of resistance, which helps them to survive. For analysis, as I am catering to a lot of aspects of home and domestic work, I have taken a bunch of theories and used them accordingly. I have taken gender theories, Simone de Beauvoir, Rita Felsky, Judith Butler, and the major one, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And to contextualize them in Indian domesticity, I have used Leela Dubey, Uma Chakravarti, Partha Chatterjee, Kumkum Sangvi's work to discuss work and domesticity, to understand the dimensions of work. I have taken Christine Delphi, Karl Marx and Engels, Iris Marion Young, Tim Ingold's idea of task space, Simone de Beauvoir idea of work, Martin Heidegger's about home dwelling, Hannah Arendt's, and to talk about care ethics, as care ethics is developing as a separate area of study. So I've taken a part of Carol Gilligan, Eva Federkite, Joan Sonto, and Sarah Riddick, and to discuss the everyday acts of resistance, James C. Scott and Michael de Certeau's ideas. The narrative strategies that these 6 novels they employ, and that helps to reveal, to show that invisible work and the feeling that women are often unable to articulate and let alone express it. First is domestic realism. These novels have detailed descriptions of domestic work. We have this scene where father is there, a mother and a daughter. So the father wants to eat an orange. The mother and the daughter, they both are employed in first peeling the orange, separating each and every piece and then offering it to the father. Father is then offered a bowl full of water and he is washing hands. So such scenes where we see how some of the work is necessary, some of the work is created by the requirement of the men and other people in the house, and some of the work that has been built up as show, as a sign of prosperity of the house. So we have many scenes which can be said as a part of domestic realism. Then we have psychological interiority. We have scenes where we have a passage into how women actually think. We have in Fasting Feast, in Fire on the Mountain, we have this character Nanda Kaul. She is now retiring. She is in her husband has died. She is no longer with her kids. Nobody has let her stay with her, and now she is in a secluded space called Carignano on the mountains, and she's reflecting back her life, and she dislikes her earlier life. She disliked how she used to go around the house full day. She was multitasking, and how she had to steal away time by sleeping for half an hour. So these psychological interiority, they gives us a passage into how women actually experience their daily life. Then silence and absences at some places, to show that women are actually not given a voice. We have mute figures who do not participate in the conversations. Then mythic and historical layering. Here, Bani Basu's novel Khana Means Mound, I would consider it to be uh, what I would consider it to be a phenomenal novel for the modern times, to understand different changing ideals of Indian womanhood, because this novel takes is divided into 2 parts. One chapter talks about the ancient civilization, and one chapter talks about the current civilization. And even in current civilization, we have 5 generations of women. So one chapter talks about the ancient civilization, how our community shifted from matriarchy to patriarchy, and how home was the first place, binding women to the home and to one man and controlling her body to supply labor to perform domestic work for a man and for a house that belongs to the man. That was the first act of controlling women. I have used this in my first chapter, but they, by placing mythical, obviously anthropological studies have proved that matriarchy existed before patriarchy, and so Bani Basu fictionalizes that anthropological fact and adds it to the fiction that caters to the modern Indian womanhood. Then we have supernatural elements as well. In Bani Basu's Moon, we have this ghost, and this is very interesting. The narrative goes like, there is a woman who is handling the whole household, and one day she dies. Nobody cares where she is. They realize that she is missing when food is not served on the table. So they go around in search of her, and she is found in the water tank because she was trying to fix something, and she fell down in it and died. she comes back as ghost because they don't know what to do now. Nobody in the house, there are all men, and they don't know what to do, how to handle the household now. So she comes back as ghost and tells them. So this is this mindset, this pressure in women, this pressure onto women that you have to manage the house as a ghost even. So this not far from reality, but again, the adding of the supernatural element in the narrative gives us, presents us, tells us how oppressive this might be to a woman, how ideologically oppressive this might be for a woman. Then we have multi-generational narrative. Khana Me's Mount again and other novels also, Dukham Sukham by Mamta Kalia. We have several generations of women who talk back, who discuss what has changed for them. Mother-in-law talks to the daughter-in-law and they're discussing, they're criticizing why we were only taught domestic work when it gets us nothing in future. They have no money, no house on their name. It has earned them nothing. So they discuss, they criticize it, they deliberate upon it, and long discussions, spatial symbolism, irony, and social satire. We have it in these novels, and they help us revealing, putting such subtle uh, subtle moments of exploitation in domestic and care work. They put them forward. So the first chapter, that is about home, hearth, and kinship, a veritable workspace. It talks about how home, that is a place of leisure and ownership for men, is also a task space, a place of maintenance for women. Bachelor and Heidegger says that home is a place of imagination and dwelling, but for women, it's not about comfort; it's about uh, constant work. When they look at their house, they don't like it. It mandates them to work constantly to provide services to others. This home, this very home, it creates women. The home acts as a domestic school for girls. It socializes them into caregiving roles. The same house works as provides employer-employee structure where a woman has to report to either the husband or the father about the work. We have the scene where mother has to report to the father about the caring of the newly born kid. And in two novels, we have the same scene. It is generally home is seen to be a place of comfort, a place of harmony, but these narratives reveal that it is not. Men, women, husband, wife, they are all into conflicts. It's tension everywhere. Then it also shows it's not all about criticizing domesticity and home for women, but it also shows that domesticity and care, the care and love that home provides by women, it's essential because there is a scene in Fire on the Mountain where Nanda Kaul is done with all the caregiving and everything, but and she doesn't want to extend care at all now. She has her friend at home. She doesn't offer her to stay because she doesn't want her to stay. And ultimately, when the friend goes back, she is raped and killed. If Nanda Kaul had overcome her hatred for care and invited her friend, she would have been saved. And there are many other instances which show the domestic.
Don't try to give instances now. Just wrap up. Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
there are also alternative models. And then in my second chapter, it talks about different dimensions of the work, how it's naturalized. It is not naturalized and it's a gender performance. It's conditional words. It's shown as it's sanctified. It's shown as if women have the intention and capability to it, then only they will be respected. Then there are when this chapter talks about if the work is a work of eminence or a work of transcendence, then its emotional and psychological impact on women. And also a major part of it, modern, how it is divided, the modern, there is a writer, Rita Felsky, she says that modernity is anti-home, and we see that in modern times, we do not like what is related to home, and that goes to the housewife, that goes to the products that are made at home, and also it harms women who are at home. They there is this problem in women juggle whether they have to be housewives or they have to take up a paid work. So how women characters deal with it, it is discussed in chapter 2, and then chapter 3 discusses how in their daily lives women take small acts of resistance. They gossip, they look back at their lives, they try to analyze it. Then then they try to take out some time out of their daily work and try to form friendships, try to live for themselves, try to have some time to themselves. And also epistemic resistance, one of the major thing. Uh, Women try to narrate the work that their mothers and other women have done, the work which is often forgotten. But these women, there is a character who is a historian. She tries to bring back the work by narrating it, by counting it out. So these subtle acts, it shows that these subtle acts, which do not seem to be a revolutionary act, but yet they help women to survive, to retain their subjectivity and negotiate power in their daily lives. And that's how my work ends. It concludes, it shows domestic work is not a natural expression of femininity, but socially gendered and learned skill. The home functions as a site of work, power, and control. Domestic work and care are essential for survival, but unequally distributed and undervalued. Women lead everyday resistance against imposed domestic work for survival. And my thesis does not reject domesticity and care, it just seeks to free them from gender segregation. That's it. Thank you, ma'am, for listening. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Tripti. Now, we have four wonderful papers so far. Yes, now we are going to begin our discussion, and I congratulate all four speakers. At the same time, just a few comments here and there. Ishtiaque, it was wonderful listening to you. I was just thinking of two things. Possibly one is about the way in which the word aesthetic, it reminds us of perception. And perception is something which comes etymologically from the original Greek word when you're talking about aesthetic. Now, the moment it became the plural became so important. And the plural, since the 18th century, has told us that what is sanitized, what is made beautiful is so important. You were contesting that, and I find that so very interesting. So, congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Ashmita, I found that you were talking about something very important, and I would just have loved to learn a little more about the kind of folklores. The actual, a few examples of the folklores would have been lovely, but I understand that time doesn't permit that. Poorva, when I was listening to you, I was also thinking of Iravati Karve's Yuganta, because she is also talking about, I mean, she wrote in Marathi, but it was translated into English. She wrote in 1967, but she was talking about Mahabharata not as a myth, but it was a history to her, and she was talking about the nation as well. So I found that very important in a context. I was just remembering it. And Tripti, it was lovely listening to you, because you see, um, I was thinking of this domestic space and how economists talk about it, how sociologists talk about it, and in how presented, and what are the ways in which we resist as women, we resist this kind of a categorization in so many ways. So very interesting papers. Congratulations all four. And now perhaps you would care to respond to some of the questions which might be coming up.
We can ask
Any
everyone to
questions?
come onto the screen.
Anybody?
We can ask everyone to come onto the screen if they wish to take part in the discussion. There's Manpreet. What about the others? What about the others? Don't they want to participate in the discussion? Come on. Yeah, Sunaina's coming in. Yeah, Manpreet.
So I said, I mean, since there is no other question coming yet, I just wanted to say that I found, Asmita, your paper, I mean, your work so interesting because, so often when we are traveling in the hills, we see these, devtas been taken. And I've asked a few times what it means. And I've been told that, it's from the temple to somebody's home, or there are some people, there are only some people who are, but whatever. So I suppose, like you said,
Mhm.
there are so many ways and how many ways they do it, right? But very interesting and, I think very meaningful. So, very good. Congratulations. That's
Thank
a
you so much, ma'am.
very interesting study, yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think we
Ashmita,
can justifiably be proud of our young scholars. All
yeah.
four presentations were very good. And Debarati, what were you saying?
As I was listening to Ashmita, I was also reminded of the Puri Jagannath, Jagannath,
Yeah.
Balaram, and Subhadra, the three siblings. They travel to their aunt's place every
Yes.
year and they return after a fortnight or so.
Mhm.
So, yes, that's also very interesting. The relations, family.
They have
Uh,
similar folklore in other places also. Last year, was it last year? I think it was last year. I attended the Shulini Mela, and that also has a story behind it that Shulini Devi goes every year to meet her sisters, and then they come to drop her back or some such story. So there is a lot of overlapping, and well, human mind works in about the same way, and in all these motifs, there is a lot of um, parallelism.
Yeah.
You know, these sessions are meant primarily for giving you the kind of exposure you require because you are all young, you are working on your dissertations, and only one of you has submitted so far. So you have a long way to go, and you don't become speakers just like that. You know, there is always a hit and try. You mess up sometimes, you learn something, and as you go along. So a session like this will certainly help you. And we are very proud of our members, our young members who have a lot of potential in them. And we would like to go out of our way to help them. So if you are a member of Mellow, well, कहते हैं ना हमसे दोस्ती करोगे तो ऐश करोगे.
Mm.
But be careful of the time
mm,
management. You have to be very careful of that. And
mm,
also keep in mind, what is it that makes a good storyteller? What is it that makes a good raconteur? Because you see, if you have been working on your thesis for 3 years or more, then obviously you know more about it than anybody else and you're full of passion about your subject. But then you must understand that everyone does not have that kind of passion. So you have to make it very interesting in order to tell the other person. This is not one of those RDC meetings, the research degree meetings. It's not like that. It's meant to convey your enthusiasm in the particular subject in which you have specialized. And for the same reason, you don't have to bring in all the theory that you have put into your paper because what we aim at is all of you should be familiar with what the others are doing. At least you should have a smattering or you should have some idea of what the others are doing. And if you're talking about a particular subject like third cinema or whatever, then it's very important to align the theoretical base with concrete examples. So next time you make a presentation, just keep these ideas in mind and be a good storyteller, even if you don't project yourself as, even if your talk does not have that scholarly stink, so to speak, at least you'll be a great storyteller and people will say, this is very interesting. I must read this. I must watch this film and so on. So, and remember, brevity is the soul of wit. So, time management is so important. But let me see if there's Debarati, see if you'd like to say something more or invite some more people to participate in the discussion.
of course, I would invite everybody if you want to make a comment.
So Naina's getting ready, huh?
So,
May I speak, ma'am? No comment as such. A very good evening, everyone. But I enjoyed the presentations. I'm sorry I missed Ishtiaque's, but I attended the other ones, and I really liked Asmita's. And everybody was saying, when we go to the hills, confront so many stories of gods and goddesses, and that this folklore should be brought to light, and it's very interesting. She's working on the same for the Mahabharata thing. How she is bringing the marginalized voices to the fore is interesting. I was just reminded of a book that I had come across. I had reviewed some time back, and it is The Forgotten Wife: The Story of Hidimbi and Bhim by Madhvi Mahadevan. So that might be of help. I don't know, but something that is that aligns with your area of research. So my congratulations to all the paper presenters. Their papers were wonderful, and as ma'am has already told you, yes, keep your enthusiasm intact, but be a good storyteller, because we are here not primarily to listen to the theoretical approaches that you're trying, but yes, how to sustain the interest of the listeners. You surely, sustained our interest for quite a long time, and congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the suggestion. We'll surely incorporate. Very apt. Thank you.
So Debarati, can we wind up now? Yeah.
I think so. Unless and until I think Ishtiaque was trying to say something earlier, but we didn't listen to him. So, Ishtiaque, one last comment from your side, perhaps?
No. I just wanted to thank you for your suggestions, and I enjoyed the session very much, and I enjoyed other presentations as well. So
Oh,
thank you so much. Yeah, that's it, ma'am. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
I would suggest that you must watch your presentations. I'll share the link with everyone. You must
Mhm.
watch your presentation and see where you can improve and how you can be a better speaker and what are the little things that you need to take care of. Huh? So all this goes a long way in grooming you. And we look forward to greater participation from all of you, because we don't want people who just turn up as, what do you call it? The visiting scholars or something like that. We want people to be wholeheartedly involved in our activities. Huh? So that's what we would appreciate. And we have seen that those who are linked with us over a long period of time, well, they do go places, they do get to important positions like Manpreet and others. Yeah, so you have something to look forward to. We will meet again in 2 weeks' time. And the other scholars, you can tell your friends that if they wish to make a presentation, and you can see that the presentation is not a grilling one, then they can always kind of volunteer and, well, we'll give them a platform. But then they have to be members of Melow, and we like loyalty. Okay, so with that, thank you everyone, and we meet again in 2 weeks' time. Thanks, Debarati. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
Great
so much.
session, great session. Thank you. Bye. We meet in 2 weeks.